Good morning, everybody. In the interest of time, we'll get started right at 10:15, which is now. Thank you for coming to the landlord engagement session. I'm your moderator for this session, and I'm going to introduce the speakers as well as read the land acknowledgement, and we're going to do questions and answers at the very end, not in between each speaker. So if you have questions, just make note of them, and then at the end, we'll do Q&A. So the city of Halifax is situated in the Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq peoples. And just bear with me to pull up the session. Perfect. So the session is a successful landlord engagement topic, just to let everybody know to make sure you're in the correct room. So today we're going to hear about effectively addressing homelessness by unlocking private market housing opportunities, which is amazing. And also private market housing opportunities also requires fostering unique partnerships, a deep understanding of landlord and tenancy needs, tailored engagement and retention strategies are necessary. We were supposed to hear an overview from OrgCode in this session today. However, there was a schedule conflict, and that is not going to happen. Ian was unable to attend the session, so just to let everybody know of that change. We do, however, have three fabulous presentations for you today. To my very right, we have Kelly Erb, who's going to be presenting on landlord partnership programs as our first presentation. We have Simone Lilly and Nicole Aylward from Newfoundland that are going to present on unpacking the key ingredients for successful landlord partnerships in a close-knit community, strategies for engagement and retention. And our final presentation will be kicked off by Alicia Martinez and Mia, and they are going to talk to us about unlocking the private market, a strategy for landlord participation. So we're going to be action-packed here today, so get comfortable. And there's a lot of people in the room, so we're probably going to have a long Q&A as well. Hope everybody enjoys the session. When you do speak, just be mindful to speak into the microphone, because even though you think everybody's going to hear you, chances are one side of the room is not going to hear if you're not in the microphone. And in addition to that, the recording for the session only picks up what's in the microphone. It won't pick up sounds in the room, so another reason to be mindful of speaking in the microphone. I'm here to help if you need any help. If you're unable to go to the microphone, it looks to me like it's cordless, so we're also really happy to pass it around if that's faster and easier, so we'll wing that part. But if you need me to come to you with the mic, just put your hand up and I'm happy to do it.
I thought you were all going to go home today and I'd be speaking to myself, so I'm a little nervous. Thank you. I'm Kelly Erb. I'm the Regional Housing Supervisor with Empower Simcoe. Empower Simcoe is located in Simcoe County, which is a very large county. It's one of the largest counties in Ontario. Has about 560,000 people spread out very far. Empower Simcoe, their main office is in Barrie, which is about 45 minutes from Toronto. The neat thing about Empower Simcoe is that it is actually primarily a community living agency. The majority of funding comes from the Ministry of Community Social Services. However, our housing program has exploded, and we now have housing resource centers in 4 of the 5 regions, a quite large Housing First program, as well as a community rent supplement program that just started this year. So, how the Landlord Partnership Program came to fruition. So in 2020, all of the shelters in Simcoe County relocated from their regular shelter space to motel-based locations in order to keep people safe. As in many other parts of the world, shelter providers noticed a dramatic increase in the amount of people needing to access shelter beds. Empower Simcoe embarked on a project that began with a research study into what others were doing across the country to stem the tide of the pandemic in regards to homelessness and vulnerable populations. We created a strategic marketing plan to help the project, and one key pieces of the strategic marketing plan was to create an in-depth survey to landlords in the county. And thank you to you both, because that is where we got the idea from. The results of this survey assisted Empower Simcoe to create the foundation of a housing stock campaign, a communication and distribution plan, as well as the Landlord Partnership Program. What is the Landlord Partnership Program? So it's an incentive-laden program put in place to alleviate the pressures on the county shelter system that were trying to transition back into their regular shelters when their numbers had increased so dramatically. The Landlord Partnership Program was a collaboration between Empower Simcoe and the County of Simcoe to try and entice private market landlords who were accessing shelter, private market landlords to offer units to people who were accessing the shelter. So in order to be part of the program, people had to be staying in shelter. What were the original incentives? So the program originally ran from November 15th, 2021 to March 31st, 2022. The funding originally came from SRRH and was broken down to cover the following incentives. So the 3-month rent incentive, what that was that landlords got an additional 3 months rent up front, including the rent that the tenant was paying. It was extremely it grabbed landlords right away and made them very interested in, yes, please sign me up. It was probably the most used fund and had the most money kind of attached to it. The Housing Hold Fund, so the purpose was that if someone was leaving a unit, we would pay the rent until we could find someone to move into the unit. We didn't really see a lot. The program ran for such a short period of time that by the time people gave 60 days notice, all that kind of stuff, we didn't really have a need to use it. However, if the program was going to expand above that, we kind of thought, hey, this is something that would be really beneficial. The second most popular was the unit procurement incentive. So we gave landlords $300 for every additional unit that they provided us. So if they gave us 1 unit, they only got the 3-month rent incentive. But if they gave us 2 units, they got $600. So it was a little bit of money, but landlords were kind of like, I've got another unit. So it also was very popular with landlords. Housing access worker resource. So we hired a housing access worker who would do all the paperwork as well as provide some moderate case management to people who were leaving the shelter system to kind of keep them, make sure they were settled, that sort of thing. The other thing that was different about what happened with this is that we had people who were accessing the Housing First program who were accessing shelter. So then the landlord got the 3-month incentive, the unit procurement, plus we have a very healthy landlord damage fund, as well as they had the chance of getting a subsidy attached to the person. So we did house quite a few people who were in our Housing First program through that system. And what that did was it enabled the housing access worker, because they didn't have to provide the case management to those people, it enabled them to have a higher caseload. And then the last was the insurance fund and the damage fund and the insurance deductible. Again, because the program was so short in nature, we didn't really have the opportunity to use it because the program was short. People actually weren't getting evicted and didn't need to use that piece of it. So, how do you entice private market landlords? How did we get them to the table? So we used all of these things. Some went well, some didn't. The radio ad was a great way to kind of get it out there and kind of put like a Hollywood vibe to the program. However, there's no way to track who listens to the radio. So we had no idea how many people we got because they can't tell. They can tell you when the ad was played, but they don't know who had the radio on at the time. The next was the Kijiji campaign. So again, it was great, but one of the issues that we had was that on our landing page, we didn't put how did you hear from us. So we have no idea how many people came from Kijiji. However, we know landlords love Kijiji, and so if you're going to do it, it's worth putting an ad on there. Social media, again, because we were like, here's the money and you got to run with it. And it was like creating forms, all those types of things. There was things like we created posters, but we didn't have links to the landing page. So probably could have spent more time with that piece of it in future, because we all know social media is kind of the way to go. Next, we did direct email. So we took churches, community centers, anything like that. We sent out emails with, the flyer saying, hey, look at this. Again, it wasn't that great we didn't have enough feedback from that, but because the program was so short and we were so rushed to get it out there, that maybe if we had more time, the email campaign would have worked. We did have success with posting on Facebook groups, like community groups, that sort of thing. We got quite a bit of response back from that, but the actual sending to churches and that sort of thing, we didn't get a huge response. The media release also was very valuable. It's free, and it gave us the ability to use senior management to play a role in, hey, look at us, this is what we've got. And media releases are a good marketing tool, especially with hot topics like housing crisis and housing affordability. It just draws people's attention to what's going on in the community. The last and most favorable was the Google campaign. So way cheaper than radio. You go in, you tell them the words you want to use, so you can put landlord, eviction, rent subsidies, anything like that. And anytime someone types in, I don't know if any of you are like, I have this symptom, and it like comes up and you're like, how did they know that I had that? It was kind of like that. So, people typed in a word and it was a direct link to our page. So totally the biggest bang for your buck. It was a lot cheaper than the radio, and we ran it for the entire time. So we ran it from November to March, and it was relatively expensive. We had $5,000 for marketing, and we used the majority of our funds on that, but it ran for the whole time. The next slide is very technical, and so this is a little bit more about the Google campaign. So as I said, it ran from November 18th of 2021 to March 31st, 2022. And in that time frame, we accumulated 260,000 impressions, which an impression is used, meaning that's how many views we got, was 260,000 views. Out of those 260,000 views, we had 3,197 clicks. So that meant 3,000 people actually clicked on the link that took them to our landing page. And out of that, 75% of the people filled out a form for more information, sent us an email saying they had a unit that they were interested in talking to us about. So this by far was really easy to read, because every week you could go in and say, this is how many people have come to the website this week. And again, it was very reasonably priced. So, money spent. So we spent $88,950. Again, $5,000 on top of that was for marketing. We had 147 inquiries, and we ended up having 36 available unit details. So that meant 36 people sent us things saying, we have units. Not all of them were, you had people who were sending you 4-bedroom apartments that were like nobody could afford. But out of that, we had 24 unit people move in total 38 unique household, or 38 people. So 24 unique households and 38 people in a 4-month period. So what this told us was that incentives bring landlords to the table. we had 147 inquiries from the private market sector, and that one of the things that this did is it allowed us to engage landlords at a high frequency and allowed us to speak to them directly about the needs of the community. It allowed us not only to get people housed more quickly, but it also aided in developing some education and awareness about the struggles of the housing. So one other thing that was a benefit is we had lots of landlords who, because of the incentives, we were able to say, your rent's too high, can you lower it $150 a month? And most of the time they did. So we had really, really good luck with that because the incentive was, they were just happy to have the incentive. So what happened? So the funding kind of ran out because we used it all. We knew it was something. We had landlords who were continuing to ask us, we want more, we want more. And so we had to kind of rethink on what we were going to ask for. And we decided that we wanted to kind of broaden the scope of the program. People had transitioned back to the regular shelters. In our 2020, our enumeration in 2022 told us that the number of people experiencing homelessness had increased from 563 in 2020 to 722. And out of those 722, we knew that 70% were chronically homeless. So what we decided was our new role would be you have to be chronically homeless in order to access the program. We submitted a proposal, and what we did was, instead of focusing on all those other incentives, we went with a 2-month rent incentive and the unit procurement. So still $300 a unit, but we only went with 2 months rent. We secured $100,000 in funding starting April 1st of this year, and we've already used we've already used the funding. So this time around, though, we took $5,000 again because we were like, we're going to market it. And we started off with just $500 in a Google campaign. And we thought, we'll just hold on because we had so many landlords that were already kind of in the wings waiting. We ended up taking the $4,500 and putting it into the program and not advertising anymore. So we only had 90 people show us, which is a huge difference. However, we secured 37 units and 53 people were housed in a short period of time. We also didn't ask for funding for additional staff, and all of our Housing First subsidies were currently in use, so there was no one housed through the Housing First program this time, which meant there was no case management. Okay, she's telling me to hurry up. Okay, so basically, we're now fine. We still have a wait list. I have 5 minutes, so I'm good. So this is a comparison between the two programs. The organization added 39 landlords to the program who we continue to work with today. One of the noticeable features is the amount of housed individuals that were in the first tied to Housing First. That went down very drastically, and it's actually a good thing because it meant that landlords were listening to the education we were telling them, and they weren't drawn to the, well, this person comes with a subsidy, they come with the damage fund, they come with intensive case management. They were okay with renting to people who they were vetting from the community. So it really, really did work. I'll say that the Landlord Partnership Program did 3 things extremely well. It allowed us to house people and their families with greater frequency, but it also gave us the ability to engage landlords at a higher level and provide education and awareness around issues being caused by housing crisis. It also created the ability to negotiate rent, which is extremely impossible in this day and age. They came to us instead of us going to them. So, one of the things that we said is in the past we were probably securing about 2 units a month. We went up to we were securing 8 units a month, which is a huge, and they were coming to us. We didn't have to drive around and look for signs, and they were emailing us and saying, hey, I've got a unit. It would be perfect for the Landlord Partnership Program. From the 2021-2022, 17 unique households have remained housed, which is like a 70% people still housed. I can't show you the stats from this year because it's only 7 months old, but I will say that everyone is still housed, which is a good thing. And then just kind of to end it off, picture of some people who were participants, and I have a quote from a landlord. Lakeview Realty has always allocated affordable rental units to those in need, and Power Simcoe's Landlord Partnership Program and its incentives have been a tremendous help in alleviating the effects of the pandemic and the housing shortages gripping our community. Landlords working with this program will definitely make a positive contribution in getting families and vulnerable individuals into homes. I believe that there's an abundance of private market rental units that could be made available and affordable, and this program is helping close the gap for those who are homeless. Mike Preston, Lakeview Realty.
So when you start your timer, give us 1 extra minute because she finished early. We're for sure going to go over. Hey folks, thanks so much for joining us. My name is Simone Lilly. I'm the Director of Community Investments with End Homelessness St. John's, and I'm really happy to be presenting here today with my colleague Nicole Aylward, who's the manager of our landlord program, Home Connect. And I do want to acknowledge that we work and operate in St. John's, Newfoundland, which is the ancestral and unceded homelands of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. And this is our wonderful land acknowledgement that our partners at First Light have written for us. Oh, apparently there's a presentation mode. Let's try this. Okay. So as I mentioned, we work with End Homelessness St. John's. We are the community entity under Reaching Home for St. John's, Newfoundland. And our work, we're a system planning organization. We fund out into the community. We run coordinated access, certainly deliver on HIFIS, but we also run a couple of community investments ourselves internally. And one of those is what we're going to talk about. For this presentation, it is really important to understand the context of St. John's. We are not a large community by any means. We're 100,000 in population, households about 50,000. And this is the stat that's always out there. 1 in 4 are experiencing housing affordability challenges. We know it's actually way more than that, but we don't have great stats in our community. And in terms of our local housing stock, what we've seen over the last few years is a very dramatic decrease in vacancy rate. So we had this really comfy 7% vacancy rate that we were really proud of for a long time. And within a year or two, that went down below 2%. We'd even say it's about 1% right now. And that happened very, very quickly for us. With that, prices absolutely skyrocketed in terms of rental rates. All of the rent promotions that we had kind of gotten used to when working with landlords came off the table. We even would get kind of the first month's rent at a discount when we were working to engage landlords. Completely gone very quickly. And in addition, especially in the pandemic, we saw all these other shrinking opportunities take place. So Airbnbs started. We had a large increase in outside ownership of our rental stock. Our community needs grew significantly, as I'm sure many of the communities in this room did as well. And our wait lists just became really long for social housing, community housing, transitional housing, supportive housing. Those wait lists were difficult to overcome. And in addition, there were some really interesting projects announced to build some of that stock, but the rate of actually making those projects take place is at a really snail's pace. We're not seeing that happen right now. And in the interim, we are relying on the private rental market. Whether we like it or not, that's what we're working with. And so we need to figure out how to do that. So in St. John's, we're small, and to work with the private rental market, that looks different than what it looks like in Toronto or Ottawa or BC. We're talking about small-scale landlords. So, usually it's sort of 5 or under. We have a couple of big landlords, but it's mostly your mom and pops who have kind of an extra unit here, an extra unit there. Some have 2 or 3 as investments, and those are the landlords you're working with. They're also a really tight-knit group. They all know each other. They all talk to each other. They all know everyone in the community as well. And we're seeing very few new landlords who are willing to work with vulnerable populations come into that market. And we have to recognize that with that reliance in the private rental market, what's interesting, though, is the landlords themselves are seeing more and more obstacles emerge to then work with community. So some would be our subsidy programs in St. John's. It actually, I think I said this yesterday in one of the sessions, takes 3 subsidies to cobble together to kind of put together a rent for an individual right now, with 3 different divisions of government. So it's becoming more and more challenging for landlords as well for them to attain a profit. And their risk is increasing. So it kind of gives that context of what landlords are thinking. So recognizing some of these factors, one of our programs that we did create, actually at the start of the pandemic, is called Home Connect. Some of you might have heard us last year. We did present on this as well, just kind of the structure of our program. But essentially, its core purpose is to provide to the community some kind of program that can bring the landlords that are willing to work with the community together, to bring community partners that are supporting clients together, and to bring tenants that need private rental market placements together, and to kind of do a bit of a coordination between those 3 parties, and then pile on top support, pile on top incentives for the landlords. So we're almost a really fancy matchmaking service in some ways. So here's a few of our stats. I won't read them all out for time, but I'll say we have 20 very consistent and strong partners in our community, which is pretty great when you think about how small that community is, and each one of those having units. And we're seeing in our program really successful rates of housing stability. I mean, the average there is over a year right now. Our program is not even 3 years old. Actually, we might be 3 years. And so we do have 65 units now, which we've decided is kind of our capacity for our budget. So we're at our capacity of where we'd like to be before we would expand. So I'm going to pass it over shortly now to Nicole to give you, I know what you're here for, which are the tools that we've used. But what we want to say, I think, in terms of this presentation is what we've learned about landlords in this context is it really comes down to 3 things. It comes down to building partnerships with them from the start before you even create a program. The second is to support those partnerships as you go through your program and consider them a really big asset. And then the third is to maintain those partnerships, because things are absolutely going to go wrong, and it's a lot cheaper to work with your landlords and preserve those partnerships than it is to build that amount of stock. So I'm going to pass it over to Nicole.
All right, on to the next slide. Just hit this button here.
Yeah,
No,
right
is that it? That one,
Wait, yeah.
the little arrow.
Yeah, just
We'll get there. We'll get there, everybody.
there you go.
Right. Hi, everyone. So like Simone said, the first thing was building a relationship with some of our landlords. So we all knew the housing crisis problem, but we only knew it from one side. So what we tried to do is try to switch and learn it from the other side. I mean, I know all about our clients, I know all about their struggles, but I really didn't know anything about the landlord struggle, what it was to be a landlord, mortgages, rates, increases, GCIs, all those fun things. I had no idea about property taxes, all that. So we did some surveys, which nice to hear other people doing too. Focus groups, individual meetings, engagement sessions. We really got to know our landlords and understand their point of view. And then we took some time and learned the facts. We had a housing need assessment done in the city of St. John's, which was great. We did some research. We listened to the community. Like we would go to all these little landlord things that were happening and just sit in the background and listen to the vibe and what was going on so we could really understand. Then we collaborated to make the program as workable for both sides of the problem as possible. And then we prioritized those relationships. So like Simone said, it became very apparent very quickly that it's a lot cheaper and a lot more sustainable to keep one landlord, keep one unit functionable on the market than it is to build a whole new unit, right? So some of the tools that we created in the program, we had the financial protection. So we have the Tenant Protection Fund, which covers damage, lost rent, RTA problems, utilities if they're included in the rent, that would be covered as well. And we established the support established in tenants. Oh, right. So the funding for the top-ups, like Simone mentioned, it's very difficult to cobble together all those fundings and top-ups. We have support to help landlords understand where that funding comes from, what dates it's going to be paid on, when you're going to get it, and we help the community establish those funding streams as quickly as possible so that they get into the landlord's bank account as quick as possible. Tenancy support plan. One of the things our landlords said was that it's just like us, they understand the housing problem from their side. They don't understand it from the tenant side. So it's difficult for landlords to house individuals that are struggling with food insecurity. They don't have proper clothing. Maybe they're very stressed with mental health, all those things. So we established a tenancy support plan. We also require in-home check-ins, and we require this monthly. Up front, we actually ask that the tenant supports do it a little bit more frequently until the client becomes, where's your mailbox? Who are your neighbors? What's the bus route? Where's the garbage day? Where's the garbage pickup? All those kind of things. And we also have a standard process. Just like with the funding streams coming in, there's a lot of inspections that happen. There's a lot of different paperwork. So what we did is we took our forms and included all the information that all our partners and all the top of information would require so that we could fill those forms out, docu-sign them over, have the landlord sign them and send them back so there wasn't a cumbersome paper trail landlords had to take. Once we build those relationships, we then had to kind of maintain. We had it all figured out. We were doing great. It was wonderful. And then everything changed and all kinds of problems happened. And we had to pivot, which, that's life. Again, like Simone said, this is going to be, some of this stuff's going to be really St. John specific. Some of this stuff's going to be, you're going to resonate with you in your soul. The dramatic, it says here increase in vacancy rates, but it's actually a decrease, obviously. Increased costs in renovation and maintenance. I mean, the pandemic just drove up any kind of home reno you want to do, any kind of repair. Those costs just really skyrocketed. Government programs and policy changes happened. There was new rental subsidy, CHB, changes in interactions between client programs. There was a big shift in our community in how you could access shelter. We had to really pivot for that for our landlords because if they needed to have a tenant leave, it was hard to get into shelter, so we had to kind of struggle with that. Changes in energy costs. Costs a lot to heat a place, and if you're including that in your rent, then that's going to affect you. The community trends, which I think a lot of this is nationwide. Unit takeovers, opiate crisis, and obviously the increased cost of living. Close. Here we go. So what we decided was more tools. Holding fees. Because it takes those 3 subsidies to cobble together to get rent for somebody, it can take a long time to get that organized and straightened out on the tenant side, right? So we have holding fees. So it's really easy for our landlords to say, I don't want to fool around with this anymore. I'm just going to go rent this to the private market. Oh, I've got a student over here. I've got someone popping in on a rotational job. I'll rent those guys. So it's easy to get your rent. So we had to pay the rent while we were getting everyone sorted out. No point in putting someone in a unit if it's not sustainable. So you have to do the work to do it. So we had to compensate the landlords while we were doing the work. Supported referrals. We've got a great supported referral program at Homelessness St. John's. It was yesterday we presented on that. It was really helpful. And then we had to pivot. Our landlord protection fund was designed to kind of pay damages at the end of a tenancy so that landlords, when people moved out, whatever wasn't covered by the security deposit would be covered by this. But we found that shockingly, people coming from crisis and homelessness sometimes had a few bumps along the way. Shocking. I don't know why it took us a while to catch that, but it did. And we were like, oh. And we found if you paid for that one broken window, if you paid for that one time you lost your keys and panicked and broke the door, if you paid for those little things, the tenancy really evened out and people became at home and you had longer tenancies and it was much more sustainable. So we started to pay for those damages in turn, like during the tenancy versus the end. Then we also noticed that there was a lot of paperwork, like we said, so we did some system navigations, all those coordinating, those subsidies, getting those together, the inspections. We streamlined the process, and we advocate quite a bit for landlords. It's really frustrating when you're a landlord. You don't understand why the government doesn't talk. No one understands that, but landlords really don't understand that. So you're getting a payment on the 28th, you're getting one on the 15th, you're getting one on the 1st, you're getting a little bit over here on the 16th, and then there's a mixed backdate payment that comes. The landlords were like, what is this? I have no idea. I don't know if I'm owed money, if I'm not owed money, why do I have extra money? So we advocated a lot for those processes to be streamlined, and we really did a lot of education around where they come from, what they're doing, and the real impact on the landlords. Clarified the communication, which is a big deal. Other thing that we did, which was a little shocking, but worked out really well, we implemented a peer support group. And we brought all the landlords together, which was a little scary at first because you don't want them to start talking about, hey, do you know this tenant, do you know that tenant, or how much do you charge for your space, how much do you get for your space, oh. And we were like, oh, it's a bit nerve-wracking. But it's St. John's, and they all knew each other anyway. So we threw them into a room, we had some coffee and some donuts. A couple times I brought some chicken, it was lovely. And they really started to form relationships and bond and solution. We've got one who's really good at spreadsheets. I get a lot of spreadsheets. And we have one who's really good at small odd jobs, and they partnered up to help one another with accounting and with the odd jobs. And we've got one who's got a truck, and they do the dump runs for the other one. And, you know, when things were happening, they could talk to one another and kind of sort things out. It was really good. We also used that time to do some information sessions and really pepper in a little bit of our own little information into what they were talking about. We brought things like greener homes incentives. We brought things about energy cost efficiency. We brought things about cleaning kits. We brought things about the benefit of pets. Just all little different things that really worked well. We also did a lot of training with our landlords, and we provide free training. We do our own landlords first, and we do often open it up to the community at large. One of the things is we've got a couple of landlords that have a lot of properties, and we offered it to those frontline staff, so they're building managers, not just the landlord or the higher-ups. We offered it to the frontline staff. Mental health, harm reduction, cultural diversity, all that stuff really went over well. Oh, 5 minutes, my gosh. Cleaning kits. This was a fun one. Simone thought it would be really great to provide cleaning kits to the units because landlords were really struggling with keeping the units clean. So we ordered 100 of these kits. So like 100 plungers, 100 Lysol containers, 100 toilet cleaners. And we were like, where are we going to store all this once we got it all? It worked really well. And we've actually decided to continue it. It saves us money because clients can keep their units clean. The toilet tissue becomes a big problem for plumbing and stuff. So it was really a win-win for everybody. We do home visit check-ins, like I said before. The agencies do that, and we do that as well, check on the property. We also found that CHB requires an inspection, which you guys know, but you have to have a working smoke detector, and that was one of the first things that tenants pulled down, is a smoke detector. So you go into a unit, you could never find one, and then you call, like, oh, landlord, can you bring over a smoke detector? Oh, can you get a picture? Can you get back in? We were like, forget this. We got some command strips, we got some screws, we've got some smoke detectors, we're putting them up left, right, and center, saving everyone time. Saving the world. Preserving landlord partnerships. So then we still use to preserve them, right? You have to maintain, you have to change, you have to preserve with them. You have to keep going. So what we've learned is a proactive approach to who you're matching the landlord and a tenant with. Just like if you're matching a tenant with a support, it's really important to match a tenant with the right landlord. Some landlords are really great with dealing with youth. They really enjoy it. They foster it. They've got children themselves. They know how to handle it. They don't get swept up in the rise and fall of the drama. And that's a great match. Some landlords are like, you give me one more teenager, I swear to God. And so you start to learn that really quickly and the tolerances and how that works out. We also learned that when you have a really difficult tenancy that goes really bad, it's not a bad thing to have a cooling off period. Just like we have burnout, landlords have a lot of burnout too. And so we would let a unit sit for a week or two, just let the landlord breathe a little bit and to get over some of the things that have happened and to get that good match to work out again. The data collection, math is not my gift. Numbers are not my thing. Sometimes letters aren't even my thing. But anyway, data collection we found super invaluable. And we started to learn. We were starting to track like eviction trends. Like, why are our clients getting evicted the most often? What's the thing? And then we can ramp up on the other side with the supports. Hey, guest management is the big thing now. Someone said, I'm not the concierge at the Jag Hotel. Why am I concerned with guest management? But unit takeovers is a problem. Too much traffic is a problem. Our clients are vulnerable. So training the support side on how to manage those things really helps the tenants stay there, right? We also had to respond to landlords quickly. They want to feel really important. They're business people, and their units are very important to them. It's a big investment. So respond quickly, respond fully, and give them the dedication it needs. And debrief. We've got some really intense things that happen, and our landlords see a lot of that stuff. So we've spent some time. 2 minutes. That's all you got left with me. Is that the extra minute that we've tacked on now? I don't know. Okay. Just wondering. Okay. And then we also, in the beginning, we communicated a lot through email, because that's how our job works. Everything is an email. We send all the emails. And we've got some landlords that are like, could you just call me? Could I speak to you? And I'm like, I can answer the phone. I can do that. Yeah. Or text. Okay. All right. Yeah. So we do all the different things. And tools to preserve the landlord partnership in general is we've also had a regular check-in. For our 5 biggest landlords, we do a monthly meeting, and we run through every single tenancy. We run through every single tenancy because maybe 2 are really problematic and taking up 85% of your time, but the other 60, let's talk about how, oh, no issues. That's right, those are ours too. Don't forget. Response to tenant support plans. Every support plan is unique and different, as we all know. Impact reports. We send our landlords impact reports. You guys have provided 20,000 nights of housing for somebody today. You guys have provided X number of sleeps. You know, all those good things that really make them feel like they're making a difference because they really do want to make a difference. And we celebrate their events. Every anniversary and birthday, you can see here how happy they are with the cupcakes. Just look. Delighted, huh? Yeah. And we celebrate big events and sad events with our landlords, just the same as you would any other coworker. So far, so good. And I think I am on time. Thanks, guys.
All right. All good? All good. Okay. The last session of the last day of the last one. Thank you for sticking it out. Yay! All right. So we're here to talk about unlocking the private market, a strategy for landlord participation. I am Alicia Martinez, and I am from Housing Works Ottawa.
And I'm Mia Suokonautio, just pronounce every letter, literally. And I'm the executive director here in YWCA Halifax.
So, this is the agenda. We will be talking about master leasing, spoiler alert. We'll be talking about Wish Halifax, Housing Works Ottawa, if you were to do this in your community, and large group problem solving. So get excited, we have an activity.
So first, I do want to welcome you to Halifax. I hope you've enjoyed your time here. If you're not from here, I see some of my colleagues from Halifax in the room. If you really loved Halifax, go to www.ywcahalifax.com and scroll down to careers. We are hiring. And I do want to also say, if you were planning to skip out early, I cannot recommend Senator Wanda Thomas Bernard, who's going to be speaking over lunch. She is a mentor. She has very much influenced a lot of my thinking around inclusion, equity, housing, but just generally being kick-ass. So you don't want to miss her today at lunch. I hate being a talking head. I really do. So we're going to do the first activity. Raise your hand if you are currently working in your job or in your life with people who are not housed at all. Great, you can lower your hands. Raise your hand if you're working with people directly face-to-face, this is your job, who are in transitional supportive housing of some kind. There are fewer of you, or you're less exuberant now. Raise your hand if you work in policy, program, development, design. Okay, some of you. Last one, raise your hand if you are the person who's working with landlords. Okay, quite a few of you. Great. Thank you for that. It's really weird talking to a crowd of faces where we don't know what you know already. For me, I start with a huge thanks. I thank all those people who in my time I've had a chance to walk alongside and for entrusting me to do something about their housing precarity. That's a huge confidence. But also thank you to all the workers who keep telling us what we need to do and what we need to do better. I've spent a lot of time doing direct work, and now I'm kind of in this organizational role. So I always start with these thank yous as a grounding for myself, that I'm not the talking head, that I'm one of this community.
All right, so objectives. We're hoping to continue to build our networks in the field of housing, to learn about master leasing and how it works, to develop hypothetical plans to roll out master leasing in your community, and to brainstorm potential solutions. Oh, I am so sorry. It's right there. And we're also going to brainstorm potential solutions to common challenges. So, we're starting off with a quote by Steve Pomeroy, who, if you read about housing insecurity and the housing crisis, he's a very great researcher in that. So to have housing first, the funding model, you need to have housing first. So that is what inspired us. So what is master leasing? A nonprofit or partner enters into a lease agreement with a private landlord. The nonprofit then creates housing agreements with participants. When the participant vacates the unit, the nonprofit retains the unit to house participants in perpetuity. So, is that better? This is good? All right. So essentially, the nonprofit is the tenant, and they get to put clients into the units. Important things to consider: participants are not themselves tenants, nor are they subletters. So they receive housing agreements that provide conditions of accommodation that can vary from the Residential Tenancies Act. And the Residential Tenancies Act, depending on the municipality, may or may not apply to the housing agreement. So examples of conditions could be requiring tenant insurance to maintain housing, mandatory access to the unit by housing support workers, mandatory disclosure of household changes, things along those lines.
So I'm guessing many of you have listened to these presentations and you're really excited about this prospect, but you're also a little skeptical because landlords are a difficult nut to crack. The vacancy rate in Halifax is like between 0 and forget about it. And so it's like, it's really, 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 really hard. And so how do you crack that nut? So the first thing for us is understanding the benefit to the landlord. The first is when the YWCA holds the lease with the landlord, they're going to get their rent the first of the month every month. So we go and we say, you don't have to go through those subsidy programs. You don't have to do any of that. And we actually, even just because I know, because I'm the check signer, they get one giant check for all of the units. So if they have 20 units with us, they get one check for 20 units first of every month. They like this. The other thing they like is we're on the hook if there's any damages to the unit. So if the cupboard doors need to be replaced, if someone smoked and they shouldn't smoke and it needs to be repainted, the leaser is on the hook. So we're on the hook. And the last one is for landlords. They don't like issues in their units, right? So they don't actually care about the issues. They care if the issues mean that the unit next door gets empty and they don't make money. So it's not a criticism. It's a business, right? And so they don't want to lose money. And so what they like about this is there's issues in buildings regardless of who's living there, pretty much, that they have access 24/7 to staff who go. Staff who, like what a lot of this was coming, is around relationships, responsiveness, and being able to respond on site. So that to us is really the key benefits for the landlord. The benefits for participants is security of tenure. So now you have an intermediary, and we make units that are otherwise unaffordable often affordable by being an intermediary. Tenants who have no rental history or no credit history can access market units. So it's very important for us to be able, and then we spend less time on Kijiji looking for units. we have units in the mix. Another benefit for participants, it's not a high concentration. You can scatter them all throughout a community. So it's funny when Alicia, they started this program in Ottawa and she reached out and I was like, well, we've been doing this since 2005, so I don't, nothing new here. But this is a program that the good news is we've been doing this for 18 years. We have a lot of stories, a lot of success, a huge amount of success. Effectively, it is, as I described it, it is participants. We get referrals from corrections, streets, shelters. Now we're getting referrals through the by name list. We work with residents and they move into the units. YWCA holds the lease. We furnish the units. We provide in-home support and 24/7 on access call. I'm not going to read you this slide, but what I will tell you there's 3 key takeaways. People can live in market housing. What we are finding is people can move from shelters into housing. It's really important to remind ourselves of that you don't need large institutions often, that people can move into this housing. We're strong believers in this. 2, people's choices or perceived choices can change when they're stably housed. So what is happening in your life now may actually dramatically change when you're housed. 80% of the women who come into WISH are actively engaged, for example, in survival sex work, and it is the first thing they're going to stop doing when their rent is covered and they're stably housed. I'm not judging the sex work, I'm just saying they are making different choices. And the last one is there is a real benefit in having housing that does not have the YWCA on the door and when the neighbor isn't another participant. We used to think very naively that group programming was like where it was at, and people said to us, we don't actually care what's going on in her life. I'm focused on my own life. I need to get forward. And so I shared a pimp with her, or we did drugs together, or I was homeless with her in the shelter. I just want to get on with my own life. And so by holding units all throughout the municipality that are non-stigmatized, embedded in the community, and where you can focus on your own life with individual supports, people have done really well. So, and they're not nonprofit owned housing.
So Housing Works Ottawa. So the master leasing pilot began in 2022, so we've only been doing this for a year, and it is funded by the City of Ottawa. Housing Works is a social enterprise that's within the Operation Come Home banner. Operation Come Home is a resource hub serving youth experiencing homelessness in Ottawa. So we currently have 11 units with 5 private landlords. There is 1 master lease administrator on staff, that is me. And so we provide all these services to our clients. We prioritize the youth chronic homelessness priority list in Ottawa, and I am very proud to announce that we have housed 5 youth off of that chronic homeless list. Thank you. Mia is correct. Clients do identify that they prefer scattered housing, and within our own first year of doing this, 7 of the 11 housed clients have already began accessing school with the intention of graduating. They've gone on to post-secondary studies. They've identified mental health, requiring mental health support, and just truly making their lives so much better just within the first year. It's really inspiring. So, if you were to do this in your community, some things to consider: objectives, participants, funding, and procurement. Procurement's the really hard one, not gonna lie. But really, what type of housing are you providing? Who do you want to occupy the units? How are you going to be paying the rent? Where are you going to find the units? And the items to consider: liability. What happens if there's extreme damage in the unit? So you can have things like a comprehensive insurance policy, that the housing agreement can contain clauses, and some municipalities, such as Ottawa, does have a landlord damage fund, which helps alleviate some of the burden on the nonprofit.
On affordability, the big case to make is this is far more cost conscious than a 24 shelter. So it is much, much more cost effective. So if you're looking for a tool to negotiate with your province or your municipality for the funding, feel free to reach out to me. I'll share our budgets with you. But the gap is obvious between capacity to pay and market rents, but it's totally doable.
Another thing, expectations. So how to ensure a successful occupancy. I can speak for Housing Works, in which the clients are all matched in the housing-based case management program, and we have absolutely amazing HBCMs who really make these occupancy outstanding.
And so now here's our activity. You have permission to take your phones out, scan the QR code. And we want, hopefully it works, we want your thoughts on these issues. So this is my 18 years of issues. One, landlord's stigma, right? So you have a criminal record, you're new to Canada, you don't have a credit history, so stigma. Neighbors, oh, my favorite. So neighbors who complain, for example, she left her winter hose out on the deck, her garden hose on the deck all winter, and that is a real problem. It's a real problem. Too few available units, so you can't find them through standard means. These are real problems, people. Rental rates that are too high. Applying a gender lens, this is actually a very common issue that we have, is she's doing really well and he comes into her unit and she loses her housing. And the other one is around, we've had this, previous to working at the Y, I've been at the YWCA 10 years. I used to work at a large organization that worked with youth experiencing homelessness. And there was like, if one is housed, everybody's housed in the same unit, and then nobody's housed. So you're very much subjected to the landlord's wishes. So if you wanted to give us your thoughts, and then also when we do the Q&A, I'm interested in your thoughts, because these are ongoing issues that we have. There is a good study by CMHC on a joint venture. It's actually about joint ventures between private developers and nonprofits. And the private developers, it's very transferable to this, is the number one thing for them to work with a nonprofit is if they trust you. And the way that trust is built is through communication and responsiveness. But I'll keep it real, like, they often also don't like our participants. So that trust is you're advocating for them and trying to prevent eviction. A lot of times we've had landlords who have wanted to move to evict a participant, and we've said, we know that this is happening, but this is actually already so much better than what was happening 3 months ago. Please give us another 3 months. And so we've been able to do that. We've got 5 minutes, but we're actually done.
Yeah. A quote just to inspire by Dr. Maya Angelou. A quick note, if you did use the QR code, you will have access to everyone's answers. And then there will be another QR code at the end of this where you'll have access to everything, including worksheets and things along those lines. If you can't scan the QR code, I have one right here. But yeah. Thank you.
Wow, that was, all three of those presentations were powerful. I suspect we're going to have a lot of questions, so let's jump right in. So what I'll do is I'll take the microphone and probably go around with it. That might be the easiest because there's very little space there for people to line up, and I don't mind running around. And if we need to, we can even use this mic. Somebody can come up here and speak at this mic, probably from that side of the room. So, and remember to speak, speakers or presenters, remember to speak into your mics. Thank you. Go right ahead.
Thank you. A couple of questions popped into my mind as I was going through. So with the first presentation, and I'm sorry I don't remember names, but you talked about paying several months of rent in advance. It was 3 and then it changed to 2. What happens when the person ends their tenancy? Does the landlord get to keep that money? Is there an agreement that would be like to cover some damages, or like how does that all work?
So they don't have to pay it back. It's theirs to keep. It's just a bonus. It's like, here you go, here's a bonus for renting to us. If the participant ends tenancy, they get to keep the money. And if someone else moves into that, they get it again.
Okay, so really it's like a really big bonus or incentive, not just the unit thing. Okay, thank you. Also, with a head lease or a master lease, as you're calling it, do you get tenant insurance then for those units? Or is tenant insurance tied directly to the tenant? Because we're technically then the tenant, right?
Right, so, is that working? So yes, the reason why it's not Operation Come Home, it's a social enterprise, is that we needed to become a separate entity to hold the type of insurance that was required to take on the risk of having our clients housed in units. We've never had to use it. We haven't even had to use the Landlord Damage Fund, to be perfectly honest. It's, again, the amazing HBCMs that we have. But we do hold it, and then we also require the clients to hold their own tenants insurance for their contents, which through the funding that we have in Ottawa, it is generally covered for the first year for them through our own funding.
So this is for you as well, for the specifically Ottawa, because I'm assuming that Nova Scotia has different laws. But I'm from London, and we've been not successful getting the city to do head leases because of the RTA issues. So how are you getting around that? Because they do have total rights, and you can't just tell somebody to leave.
So we modeled our occupancy agreement and the head lease with the landlord and the client with cooperative housing in mind. So co-ops are also not covered by the RTA, but they are a form of tenancy. And I came from the co-op sector originally, so I have a lot of experience with that. And so we were able to use that as a jumping off point. Within your RTA, it would probably contain clauses in regards to supportive, nonprofit, or cooperative housing. And then that's how we house our clients, and that was the inspiration. We had all our documents vetted by a law firm that specializes in non-traditional tenancies and cooperative housing. So.
We have 3 people in the queue, just so you know.
Okay, so my question was along those lines as well, especially for Ottawa, because I work in advocacy and have for 30 years representing tenants and tenants' rights. So how does that impact on tenants' rights?
So we're an organization that's intended to support youth experiencing homelessness. It's not really a good look for us to have people re-enter homelessness, so we do our best to work with the client and ensure that they do not lose their occupancy. The only time that we've had an occupancy end was because the client, unfortunately, their guests put everyone in the building at risk, and we had to draw a line at that. The client did have multiple opportunities. They were given many warnings. It's in their occupancy agreement that they work with us. They refused to work with us. It was unfortunately a circumstance we could not avoid. But that is the only time that we've had to terminate an occupancy at this time. I work very close with the clients. When they sign the agreement, I do tell them that they are waiving certain rights. They always have an option under Section 9, I believe it is, of the Residential Tenancies Act to apply at their own cost, and we do tell them that. And I let them know that they can talk to their HBCM, their housing-based case manager, in regards to any questions they have if they feel that they are not being supported by the occupancy. We are separate, so they can support them without any sort of conflict in the workplace. But yeah, just really open with the client in regards to what they're signing, and they seem to be happy about that.
Yeah, and from our perspective, so the question is around tenant rights, and so, which is a great question. So for us, the way that we framed it is this is a program participant. So like you're a program participant in a shelter, now you're kind of scattered throughout. So we hold the lease, and then they are program participants without a lease. So that's kind of how it, and so the funding comes through the province that covers the cost of the housing for us, and we fundraise the balance realistically. What we try to do, people lose their housing when we lose our housing. So if the landlord moves to evict the participant, they actually have to evict the Y. And so, which is good in the sense that we can then be more pushback and more intermediary. The other thing is when someone, so let's say Alicia's living there, what we try to do is then we negotiate that the lease gets actually, we get out of the way, and now we can demonstrate to the landlord, look, she's lived here for 2 years successfully. why don't you just give her the lease and we're gonna step out? So we've done that where we've transferred it as well, and then the landlord gives us a new unit somewhere else. And so she doesn't have to move. And so the program isn't determining where people have to live. So that's kind of what we're trying to build. Anyway, so I'm happy to answer more questions, but I know there's more people in the queue.
No, that's great.
Testing, 1, 2, 3. Does it work? Does it work if I talk really loud?
First off, I just want to say thank you. It was super informative. I also come from London, Ontario, and I work for a program called the Housing Identification Program. And we offer landlord liaison services to our landlords in our community. And my question is for Simcoe and Home Connect. When you talk about unit damages and money towards the units, I know Home Connect, you said $10,000 for your landlord protection fund. Now, is that $10,000 per unit, or is that like your entire fund, or is it, in your sense, when you said you had the damages funds, is it per unit? Like, how much are you funded per unit to offer that landlord? Like, do you go in and say, if you rent to us, we can up to so much money per unit? Because right now, most of our funding does go to, like, we can spend $10,000 in a unit on damages. So I just wanted to know what your funding was based off of.
So for us, it's $10,000 per tenancy, per unit. Can't hear me. That's a new one. That's new. Yeah, so it's per tenancy per unit. So, and it's above and beyond the security deposit. So we use that first for damages, and then we go in afterwards if there are extra. It's the same kind of money we use to fix damages during the tenancy as well. So like we work with the landlord. So if someone busts their door or busts their window to get in, say, we'll talk to the landlord. Are there any other issues with the tenancy? How's things going? How are things? Would you continue renting if this was the fixed? And they're like, yeah, it's good. Then we'll pay that. But it comes off that $10,000. You don't get that $10,000 at the end. You get that per tenancy.
So I guess my other question to that also before you speak, Kelly, is do you let the landlord know prior to, like, that it's a $10,000? Because I know from our program, we do have some landlords that like to take advantage of our funding. So, yeah. So, do you?
Who are you
kind of
dealing
keep
with?
that secret beforehand and just know, like, it's $10,000, or
No.
do you tell them up front?
They know. Yeah, they
Okay.
know. And they talk, so they all know anyway. But what we do is when they submit, at the end of the tenancy, they submit a claim form for all the damages that they want us to cover. And we go through it with a very fine-tooth comb, and we've got parameters around it, and we make them kind of enter in a little bit of information about each thing and all the receipts. And then my coworker will then go on Home Depot and Google the SKU and see what it is, and then he'll come back. And we have also, like, the data part. We've accumulated a little bit of data about how long it takes to repair a door, how long it takes to fix a lock, or those kind of things. So we understand if they're claiming 3 hours, but everybody else claims 2, then we'll approve 2 hours, not the 3. So they know, but we also double check.
Yeah, so with the landlord partnership program, this time around, we didn't offer damage fund just because we found that the incentive and the procurement was enough, but we do have a housing first program. We have no limit. It's when the funds are gone. So if someone puts in a $14,000 claim, which happens, we pay it, but the same thing. I don't pay for paint rollers. I don't pay for, I often don't pay for paint, kind of thing. I'm like, there's no way it costs you $5,000 to paint your unit. And we usually say to the landlord, we'll give you this, and we make the landlord pay everything up front. So I don't pay until I see receipts from the landlord that they've paid it. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question around your intake process, or like your what you use to, I guess, determine who's going to be housed with you. Do you guys work with people who are high in their? Oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Yes. Okay. So I just have a question around your intake process, and wondering if you guys work with clients or participants who are really high in their addiction still, or if you have like a more strict screening process of who you're housing.
You want to talk? Me? Okay. Well, I'll speak loud. Yeah, that's not a problem for me normally. Our stat is currently right now of the units that we have rented, tenancies happening, we've got 31% that were chronically homeless prior to coming into our program. So we work with anyone. We're traditionally housing first. It doesn't necessarily matter what you're dealing with. We'll work with you to work with it. But what we do be really careful is we match you with the right landlord in the right setting. So some people, some landlords, just like all of us, have had traumatic experiences with alcohol, and they really don't do well if someone's struggling with alcoholism. And we just match somebody different with that. We have some people who are really great with needle cleanup, and they don't mind at all. We have some landlords that are really understand the plight of domestic violence, and they'll work really well with that. So we don't screen out anyone who's really still struggling, but we do be really careful about the match that we make, because we find that's the big key. Even more so than the neighbors, because if a landlord's really tolerant of someone with addictions, then they get the calls from the neighbors, and they're doing the educating, right? It's okay. It's their life, their choice, right?
Any other questions? Okay. We have two. This gentleman over here raised his hand first. I'll get right back to you.
Thank you. My question is for the group from Halifax. With the head lease, I noticed that you had a facility manager on board, part of your team. Does that mean that that particular person will do move-out inspections with the landlord in terms of determining what damages are present and what was pre-existing, what's new, and so on and so forth? And who gets to determine the overall damages that are present that was caused by the particular resident that you just housed?
That's a great question. I think I'll start with my general philosophy, which is hard on the issues, soft on the people. So very good relationships, but also don't let people push you around. And that sounds kind of more aggressive than it is, but it really is like these guys. It's like that's not what it actually costs. So we have on staff. So YWCA Halifax is a multi-service agency. We also have childcare centers and other programs. So we have on staff a full-time facility manager and a full-time like a repair handyman. He's amazing. And we're bringing on another person right now, shortly. So because we have a lot of work, that children also are really hard on toilets, just so you know. Lego does not flush well. But what we do is we will walk through units. We will do the inspections. We do the inspection with the landlord and often with the participant to start. But when participants leave, again, because they're participants and not tenants, they may leave and there's no exit for them. Like we're not holding a damage deposit because we never collected a damage deposit. We have left very few units except to transition to a participant. So many, and I will tell you, in 2005, when we first started this, we were renting at, wait for it, $500 a month. So it is really right now, and the units right now that we're renting, on average, they're about $850 a month. So we're well below market, and they want to increase our rents, and we always push back and say no. And we do things too, like write letters for the company newsletter or whatever. Like, this is the impact that you're having. So but the facility manager is really, really important so that we can do 10,000 per unit. Per tenancy is not an unreasonable number, but it's always cheaper if you can do that in-house.
Perfect. We have two questions in the queue.
So my question is, I'm from a rural community in this province, and I'm the housing locator, and one of my challenges is all of the landlords know each other, and they have a naughty tenant list, and I really struggle to navigate around that, and I wondered if you've got any suggestions on how you might address that, other than suggesting a creative last name.
So they don't know the names of our participants.
Right.
Our participants are not their tenants, and we don't give them confidential information that is not relevant to their tenancy.
I understand that for you, but
Yeah.
for you guys working with landlords, which is more what I do, we're not in the same position as you. How would you navigate around that, or how have you navigated around that?
Yeah, we work with a couple of landlords that have multiple properties, and they've been in the game for a long time. I always joke and say one of our landlords is our best outreach worker. I mean, he's just always there doing the work, and he's talking to the people, and he has a really keen understanding of who struggles and when, and he can really spot someone who's on the naughty don't rent list. And again, they all talk. What we do say is, well, why are they on that list? What is the problem? Like, what got them on there? Oh, they left the unit in damages. Well, sure, that's not a problem for you. We got the damage protection fund. Oh, well, they had a lot of guest management issues. And I said, well, sure, that's not a problem. We'll put them in a small space. They can't have anybody over in the bed sit. What are they going to do? You know, rent the floor? Really? Oh, well, there was a lot of trouble with damaged windows and stuff. Oh, that was probably a domestic abuse situation, and they've gone their separate ways. So we just really openly asked what was the problem. And then if we can mitigate it, we say, well, here you go. Or they had a big dog. Well, we still pay for damages. So we work on that. We just openly ask why, and then we just try and work around it. And some clients would do better with supported housing, and we know that, and are doing better with supported housing. But for the most part, that we find someone who's like, oh yeah, you have solved that problem. That's fine. We'll give it a shot.
Thank you. Sorry, can I just quickly,
I just want to add one thing. One of the other things is our landlord, because we're paying those holding fees, we actually only give them a certain amount. If there is an absolute issue, say it's their son's best friend, sometimes we get these really weird dynamics, or they do really have a very serious concern that would make sense, particular location of a unit based on what else is around, that kind of thing. They're able to refuse, but we do have a limit. We say if you're going to say no twice, then you're putting even your own participation in our program, which is actually giving them quite a lot of funding, that becomes off the table. So we negotiate back and push back as well on that one. Yeah.
Just regarding something that you were touching on, the model that you use, which is the master lease. So we do have a similar situation. I kind of inherited this job, and I think it's really only half a master lease, because what I'm finding is our organisation is asking our occupants of the units to pay a damage deposit to the landlord, and they're asking all of the money. Has all of the deep subsidies that they've got a non-portable subsidy attached to the units. That is all of that, and the client portion, the tenant portion, or occupant portion, sorry, is also being paid direct to the landlord. Now, I understand the landlord's frustration, because what he expected historically before I started in the role was to get his big fat juicy check every month, which is understandable. He wants a hassle-free, nice check, and that is not what's happening. And I'm really struggling to unravel it so that we can get the benefits paid to us directly, and then we can write him the check. Do you understand?
Yeah. We can talk later.
Oh,
okay. Anybody else? Do you want to respond, or are you going to comment?
She lives in Nova Scotia. I'll talk to her.
Perfect. Anybody else have questions? Just a show of hands. I have one here in the front, and we have right here.
I'll try to be quick. I work in New Brunswick, and one of the biggest challenges we're seeing is how to house clients who have higher acuity levels, so they need wraparound supports. What we hear the most is people get evicted because they had friends that they met that sleep over sometimes because they don't want them to go on the street, or they need additional kind of support on mental health or substance use. And I'm just curious to hear sort of how do you work with clients who are higher acuity, and if so, kind of how do you navigate that with the landlords?
We've actually had landlords who have said, so-and-so's got people staying over, I have a unit here that's available for them. So, we have had landlords that are, they're okay. Like, we definitely support people with high acuity, for sure, 100%, so.
Yeah, us as well. We've got unit takeovers is a big thing, which is a little different than the guests. Guests is usually not a big deal for a lot of our landlords, unless it becomes a unit takeover, and then there's lots of property damage and stuff. And we're currently working together with the local city bylaws and the RNC and our housing division to try and sort out a good navigation for some of that stuff.
Thank you.
Hi, I just have a question for the first two panelists. I'm curious about, I'm setting up a program to support landlords in Whitehorse, Yukon, so it's a very different, a little bit different, it's very small. So, and everybody knows everybody. But one thing that we have discovered is a huge issue and a huge reason that people are evicted is just not paying their rent on time, because social assistance, all of these things come at different times, like you were talking about. Have you ever tried, or do you think it would work to have like our company or the organization pay the rent on time every month, like they do, and then we obviously take their rent in and deal with that. But if it was paid on time, do you think that would make a difference? Have you ever tried that? And
so we strongly encourage participants to have their pay direct for rent. That is something. Any programs that we have that have subsidies, the subsidy goes to the landlord, not the tenant. We also have housing retention fund that we can access to pay arrears, that sort of thing. But tenants still don't pay their rent. It happens. And it's just about education with, our housing access workers or our housing first case managers, just trying to encourage people to pay, that sort of thing. But the landlords do like the pay direct. Sometimes the problem is we have multiple landlords and they are like, I need checks because I don't know where this money's coming from. So I do like the idea of getting one check. I think that's a really good idea because that is something that our landlords sometimes struggle with.
We have a total similar problem. The landlords are so frustrated. It isn't that the tenants aren't paying, it's that they're coming at weird odd times, and the processing time takes sometimes 60 days in Newfoundland to get paid, and our smaller landlords are struggling, and our bigger landlords are getting overwhelmed because they just get a big dump of money and they don't know where to allocate it sometimes. It's a giant problem. We do offer to float some money if a landlord is really struggling to hold, but we also say, we pay rental arrears, so at the end of this, you will be covered. We just need you to kind of hold it out. And then we do advocate to the government systems, this is the impact you're having. This is how many landlords have said this month, I'm not working with CHB anymore, I'm tired of it. I mean, they're going to, but we do the advocacy part too.
So just on that one, the way that we do it is we do all the back end messy work, right? So if it comes in on the 15th to the Y, it doesn't matter because we've paid on the 1st for the landlord. So we're chasing the money basically on their behalf. But then they're happy. It's very predictable.
And the other two, do you think that model would work better in your organizations? Or
No, I think it would. The problem that we have is that we don't hold the lease. The lease is with our tenants, right? And we like that aspect because it helps them, it gives them a real right to be where they're to. This is your legal right now to be here, which we really like. They sign the paperwork, they know. They learn the tenants. We always give a little tenant guide, what your rights and responsibilities are. And so we like that the lease is there. And the founders have said, we can't pay you, you're not the landlord. So I think we would have to enter into a master lease in order for it to work. We would love it to be like that. I've struggled all morning with that.
I will say that is why we started exploring master leasing, because I actually had your role. We called it a housing specialist, but it was a housing locator. And the landlords identified so many issues that we fixed with master leasing. And so the first landlords we had were landlords who stopped participating with the issues, but still wanted to work with our clients.
Yeah, I think the same goes for us. I have 2 housing specialists that report to me, and both of them would be sitting here saying, see, we should do master leases. See, we should do master leases. So it isn't something that we have, it's there. It's even in the other role of the community living division, there's lots of talk about that piece because group living is kind of going by the wayside. And so it's at the agency's forefront that we need to look into master leasing and what that looks like. One of the things that we always struggle with is that we find it would be hard to be the landlord and support the tenant. That's what our struggle has always been with master lease. How can you be the landlord, but also support the participants.
Separate
So-
entities.
Yes, I know.
And a partnership with another organization that provides the wraparound
Well,
support.
the person who does our funding is in the back of the room, so I'm hoping that she's going to be like, oh, let's talk.
Awesome. We have about 4 minutes left for questions. Does anybody else have any questions before we wrap up today? Can we have a couple?
Before you ask that question, I just want to say, and I know we've lost like 70% of the room, but keep in mind, like to me, landlords are business people, but they're also community members. And they are also bothered by encampments. They're also bothered by what they're seeing, overwhelmingly. And if we're able to find ways to provide a solution that reduces that risk for them on the business side, you may find more favorable landlords than you think. The big thing is around like post-Christmas, like how do you make the pants fit, is the gap in what capacity to pay and what they're asking. And so if you may have more negotiating room than you think if you can trade off for simplicity for other things, right? But that gap is really the big hurdle, but it is something that is doable, and we continue to negotiate with landlords all the time.
Very inspired by all of you. This is wonderful. My question is for Empower Simcoe. Your stats. I just noticed automatically that you housed even as many people without all those incentives the second time. I'm in the same kind of 2-3 year mark with our program. And what do you think contributed most to those housing stats? Like, was it just the staff found their groove with their clientele, building those relationship with landlords? Like, what's the biggest? Why do you still have the same amount of people housed? And that's wonderful.
I think that the staff have done a really, really good job at the engagement piece with landlords, and it is about the monthly phone call with the check-in, the email. You send them a Christmas card. We've developed landlord forums where landlords can all come together and kind of talk about shared issues, where you bring in a fire marshal so that, you give them the education around mental health training, that sort of thing. And then I think that there's lots of places for people to go in the community, and even if we can't provide the case management to people because we don't have the capacity, we have lots of our resource centers have drop-in centers at all the libraries. We're in every shelter. So it's really just about making sure that the tenant knows where to go if there's a problem, but that the landlord also knows who to call when there's an issue.
Thank you. Did you have a question?
I just wanted to add one thing on your presentation when you were talking about all the ways you recruited landlords. Just recently happened to us this year. We saw a trend. If you're low on budget and you're cheap like me, if you reach out to some real estate agents who are selling to investment properties, and they understand your program or your contact, they'll share your message for you, and they know the market value that you're looking for. They know those properties, and they'll connect you. And we've seen good success in that way. Yeah, and it's cheap.
Hi, sorry, housing worker, Toronto. I'm sorry I came in late. I had another emergency, but I was looking at the program today, and I know there's like from Simcoe and Halifax, and I kind of got the tail end of talking about your program, and it sounds really great, but I'm probably going to need more information about it. But catching what I heard, like for that program, would that kind of do you have a program like that in Toronto?
We don't.
You don't? Like, how would you think of a program like that would work in the city of Toronto for the size and the rents and?
Anybody else here from Toronto?
From Vancouver, right? And the struggle there is so much because the landlords, they tell me, why would I choose one of your clients when I have 20 more clients that they want the unit and they have a steady job, they have everything that I need to be to have a stable client, right? So that's the
I can answer that one. So it's similar in Ottawa, but if you've been in property management, if you've been a landlord, which I have been, it doesn't matter what they look like on paper. Once they're housed in the unit, things could go very awry. So the incentives that we have, the partnership, the fact that I was a property manager and have a decade of experience, like they feel confident trusting the package. We have wraparound supports. I didn't have a chance to answer the question about someone struggling with substance use, but we have a substance use counselor in our staff that we could direct a client to. Like we truly provide all the supports, and landlords seem to really enjoy that we don't just come as us saying we'll pay for everything and we'll accept the liability. We come with supports. We come with the guarantee that we're there to provide assurance, and if things really go wrong, then we'll work together to rehouse or otherwise make the occupancy work better for everyone. Because truly, like you could get a university professor, for example, no offense to anyone who may be a university professor, and then their mental health declines and suddenly they fall into possibly hoarding activities or substance use, and then they themselves who looked amazing within 6 months are no longer an amazing tenant. So.
I think the other thing too is and I know that it was talked about from the Newfoundland group, is our staff have gotten very good at knowing this tenant will work really well with this landlord. Like it's really knowing your landlords and knowing, what works for them. And I think that's what we've done is we just gotten really good at knowing our landlords and knowing the participant and what's going to work for them, the areas to live in, that sort of thing. So that's really the bottom line.
There are more than 20 responses to each of these questions on the QR code. So if you didn't, and if you fill out the form, you'll see everybody's response. So I'm going to put a plug into that as well because other people gave their expertise on these concerns. So it's kind of neat. I just did a quick check. There's like some of them have 24 responses.
Awesome.
You can access the responses like after people who will. Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Because I know that people will be accessing this after the fact. Like if you want to keep that link, or the QR code at the end provides resources, the PowerPoint, everything, including access to all those answers again. Because I'm going to be checking in a week later, and I'm sure there'll be lots more.
Perfect. So take the QR code before you leave. We are out of time. It is our session has ended. I know there were other questions, but the panelists' contact information should be in the CAEH app, so you can reach out directly for your questions or for some more one-on-one information.